Wake your punk ass up.
Warrior class, zoo, stand up. Warrior class, zoo, rise up. Warrior class, zoo, speak up. Warrior class, zoo, show up. Warrior class, zoo, smoke 'em out.
Peace, blessings, and black power. It's OOOOOWWWTT coming to you black at it again. Go ahead and put me in your Bluetooth. Go ahead and put me in your headphones. Go ahead and put me on your regular listening apparatus. As always, I don't want you to look at it because this is not a visual. This is pretty much audio. So keep your hands free. Continue on with your daily chores around the house or exercise. And pull up a chair and let's see if we can learn a few things.
So I'd like to begin with a story about monkeys. You take 5 monkeys and you put them in a cage. And you suspend a bunch of bananas from the roof of the cage. Close the door. Inside the cage is a little stool. Now, monkeys like bananas, and they're pretty smart. So they look at the bananas, they look at the stool, they pick up the stool, they go for the bananas, and as soon as the first monkey touches the bananas, you spray freezing cold water on all of them, which they hate. And they back off, and then they'll creep forward, and they'll try again, and you spray them again. And after about 3 attempts at getting the bananas and getting sprayed, they'll stop, and they'll just sit there and look sadly while they're shivering, look up at those bananas. Now, at that point, you open the door, and you take out one of those monkeys, and you put a new monkey in. So now you have 4 wet monkeys and 1 dry monkey in the cage. You close the cage, and the new monkey looks around, sees 4 shivering, wet monkeys, sees the bananas, sees the stool, moves the stool, goes for the bananas, and as soon as he starts to reach for the bananas, the 4 wet monkeys jump up and beat the heck out of him. So now you have 4 wet monkeys and a bloody monkey. And you open the door and you pull out one of the wet monkeys and you put in a dry monkey. So it's now 3 wet monkeys, a bloody monkey, and a dry monkey. And you close the door and the dry monkey looks at the bananas, looks at the stool, moves. Now all 4 of the other monkeys jump up and beat the heck out of him. So now you have 2 bloody monkeys and 3 wet monkeys, and you repeat this process again and again. And the 5th time you repeat it, there are now no wet monkeys left in the cage. There's 4 bloody monkeys and a dry monkey. The dry monkey, the new guy, looks at the stool, looks at the bananas, moves the stool, goes for the bananas, and the other 4 jump up and beat the heck out of him. Now think about that. Why did they do that? Because that's the way it's always been done. That's what you do. But none of them ever personally experienced getting wet. They don't know why that was the way it was. Just that's the way it was. So that's what they did. And it occurs to me that in many respects of our lives, we are like those monkeys. We do lots of stuff that we have no idea why we do it, and we don't even bother to examine it. And in some instances, that does harm. We have certain things that we do that may once upon a time have made sense in a particular set of circumstances, but probably don't make sense today, and still we do them. And some of those block our ability to make people as creative as they could be. So I'd like to begin with a story about monkeys. You take 5 monkeys and you put them in a cage, and you suspend a bunch of bananas from the roof of the cage, close the door. Inside the cage is a little stool. Now, monkeys like bananas, and they're pretty smart, so they look at the bananas, they look at the stool, they pick up the stool, they go for the bananas, and as soon as the first monkey touches the bananas, you spray freezing cold water on all of them, which they hate. And they back off, and then they'll creep forward, and they'll try again, and you spray them again. And after about 3 attempts at getting the bananas and getting sprayed, they'll stop, and they'll just sit there and look sadly while they're shivering, look up at those bananas. Now, at that point, you open the door, and you take out one of those monkeys, and you put a new monkey in. So now you have 4 wet monkeys and 1 dry monkey in the cage. You close the cage, and the new monkey looks around, sees 4 shivering, wet monkeys, sees the bananas, sees the stool, moves the stool, goes for the bananas, and as soon as he starts to reach for the bananas, the 4 wet monkeys jump up and beat the heck out of him. So now you have 4 wet monkeys and a bloody monkey. And you open the door and you pull out one of the wet monkeys and you put in a dry monkey. So it's now 3 wet monkeys, a bloody monkey, and a dry monkey. And you close the door And the dry monkey looks at the bananas, looks at the stool, moves. Now, all 4 of the other monkeys jump up and beat the heck out of him. So now you have 2 bloody monkeys and 3 wet monkeys, and you repeat this process again and again. And the 5th time you repeat it, there are now no wet monkeys left in the cage. There's 4 bloody monkeys and a dry monkey. The dry monkey, the new guy, looks at the stool, looks at the bananas, moves the stool, goes for the bananas, and the other 4 jump up and beat the heck out of him. Now think about that. Why did they do that? Because that's the way it's always been done. That's what you do. But none of them ever personally experienced getting wet. They don't know why that was the way it was. Just that's the way it was. So that's what they did. And it occurs to me that in many respects of our lives, we are like those monkeys. We do lots of stuff that we have no idea why we do it, and we don't even bother to examine it. And in some instances, that does harm. We have certain things that we do that may once upon a time have made sense in a particular set of circumstances, but probably don't make sense today, and still we do them. And some of those block our ability to make people as creative as they could be.
Now remember, family, I said it's the women that are teaching it. So in that little short story, what you heard was the wet monkey story, where you had monkeys. Well, we're going to call those monkeys ancestors, elders, or olders, those that have lived before us in a particular environment. So let's say civil rights or the plantation era, and they were beat and they were mistreated a certain way. So in their mind, what they remember was you wasn't supposed to get to that apple, because every time you go to that banana, because every time you go towards that banana, you get cold, you get wet. Every time that you cross that line, you get beat. What I'm trying to show you here, yes, I did play it twice. What I'm trying to show you here is your mothers, the women, are doing this to you. So when I say the women are teaching, or the women are raising younger males, what I'm saying is if the female is tasked with teaching the children, raising the children, then what she's going to do is keep teaching the same things. She's going to keep teaching the same things because, one, in the human lived experience, gender-wise, it's because it benefits her. This is why they keep teaching what they teach about Egyptology, even though it caused Egypt to fall. This is why they keep teaching polygamy and multiple marriages and multiple sex partners, because it only applies to them. And what they're after is the ability to do what they want to do, period. And in order to have the ability to do what they want to do, they have to keep teaching these lessons. Well, slavery, racism, white supremacy, all things operates the same. I said before, patterns. Patterns don't change, people do. Now, we're in an environment where the civil rights generation are thinking the exact same way. That we, the children of the civil rights generation, the children of the black liberation, that we should basically bow our heads, keep quiet, and don't say anything. The men and women that were living, the civil rights generation that was young when it was their time, they were colonized. This is why it's hard to get them to think beyond anything white. They're going to think whatever is in the best interest of the white folks is going to be in their best interest. So when it's time for them to invest, when it's time for them to go car shopping, when it's time for them to go get a house, when it's time for them to watch a particular movie, when it's time for them to have a particular thing of cologne or fragrance, when it's time for them to do anything that's in their best interest, they're not going to think of doing things in their best interest. They're only and primarily going to always think about how to do things what was in the best interest of white people, meaning they consider white folks to be gods. So if the white folks have a Cadillac, then I want a Cadillac. If a white person has a Corvette, then I want a Corvette. If a white person has a German Shepherd, then I want a German Shepherd. They're going to think whatever the white person thinks, they're going to translate that to themselves. That's colonization. That's House Negro 101. Yes, sir, boss. We sick today, boss. That's exactly how the civil rights generation thinks, which are your baby boomers. They're not just the civil rights generation just because of that moment in time. They are also your baby boomers. Your baby boomers are from 1945 to 1965. 1965 to 1985 is your Gen X's. And the reason why I'm trying to show you guys how patterns continue to stay the same is you got to remember who's in existence, who's teaching it. So if you remove the environment if you take all of those older monkeys out of the cage and you only put newer monkeys in the cage, then how are the newer monkeys? No, I said that wrong. If you have the older monkeys still in the cage, but you no longer use those tactics, anytime you put a newer monkey in the cage, the older monkeys are going to still enforce the older ways, the older fears. That is what you're having now. The women are teaching polygamy. The women are teaching multiple sex partners. The women are teaching rebellion. That's what you have now. The civil rights generation, your baby boomers, they're teaching that white is right, light is what is white is right, brown. If you're brown, you're down. If you're black, get back. And if you're light, you're white. If you're light, you're all right. And if you're white, you're out of sight. They're the ones teaching that. How are they teaching it? The problem that you're having is you think that they're teaching it by saying specifically, tie your shoes. Tie my shoes. You better tie your shoes. They're not teaching it that way. They're teaching it the other way. Well, how? One of the ways they teach it is they'll take your kid out of the projects and they'll move him into the suburbs. When they move them into the suburbs, our suburbs is not the same as it was when we were kids. When we were kids, you can come out of the projects and get into the suburbs. But the suburbs was still middle-class black America. And then it was rural. Your rural area 30 years ago was your white folks. That's where they're at. But for us black folks, us 70s babies that was born in the cities, Jersey, New York, Philly, we had projects. And the 60s babies, they had ghettos. They had ghettos. Coming out of the ghetto, you was able to go to the suburb. The suburb was middle-class black America. Understand what I'm saying? So now in 30 years, when you come out of the projects in the early 2000s or the 90s, you can go into the suburbs, which is still middle-class black America. But now around 2010, the women started moving into the rural areas, which is further away from the projects. Why? Because by default, it wasn't far enough away. The suburbs was not far enough away from the projects or the hood. It just wasn't. Especially when you had the borderlines. You can be in and out of the bad part of the city just by crossing the street, and all that negativity that was once contained ends up bleeding over into the suburbs. But now that they done blurred the lines, what you eventually have is you have them skipping over the suburbs and running all the way to the rural area, which is further out of the city, which is on average anywhere between 20 miles on up away from the city or your area where it's heavily populated with crime. What I really wanted you to hear is yes, both genders can teach it. But when I give you the specificity of which gender is teaching what, yes, there is a specific gender teaching something specific. Not both genders are at fault for teaching all of the same things. Both genders are at fault for not teaching their children courage. That's what I'm saying. You did not teach your children courage. You taught them fear. And now that you've been teaching your children fear, they are scared to do the right thing. They don't have the discipline to wake up and go to work and get everything straight and be patient. Now, when I also say that it's your mother and or your father's teaching you this fear, they're teaching you the continuation of the fear. I need to make this clear at the same time. Even though your mother, your biological mother, the guardian or whoever raised you, they are teaching you. I need you to also be aware that they're not teaching you fear like it's the boogeyman. They're teaching you fear like as if you were on the plantation. That's the problem I'm having an issue with. You are supposed to be afraid of the neighborhood bully. You know what they're capable of. You are supposed to be afraid of white supremacy, racism, WSR. You know what they're capable of. But you were not supposed to continue to teach them fear. Don't go on this side of town. Well, when we went on this side of town, they beat us up and they chased us off that side of town. So now you can't go on that side of town no more. You can't teach that to the next generation. Those parameters aren't there. Those boundaries aren't there. But you're teaching your children those boundaries. And you're teaching your children those parameters, and you're teaching your children that these or this is the repercussion for doing those things. And it isn't. That's not it. You were supposed to have been teaching your children what has changed. So they are supposed to be afraid of WSR, or not afraid but aware, and they were supposed to be afraid of the neighborhood bully, the usual suspects. But what you were supposed to be doing is teaching them how to overcome their fear, not run away from their fear. And you guys are constantly teaching them how to run away from their fear. I don't want to go long. I just wanted to hit you with these psychological analysis that they did. The video was, what can 5 wet monkeys teach us about creativity? And I need you to be clear. When they say creativity, they're speaking code. Same way I tried to always explain to you. They're always speaking code. That's the only language they speak. You just don't know their code. Men and women like myself, we're trying to teach you the code. Some of us know the code, and all we do is we teach against the code. So if they tell you to go left, we're going to go do the homework. We're going to go do the research. We're going to go do the etymology. We're going to go do the civics. We're going to do everything and teach you to go right. But why should you also answer the question, go left? Because they're telling you to go left, but they're not going left. They're telling you to go left, and all signs point left, and all red lights, and all diction, and all newspaper clippings, and all internet things saying go left, but they're not going left. They're just telling you to go left. So this elaborate scheme is to always get you to go in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, they're always going in the direction that best suits themselves. So when it says creativity, don't get hung up on the word creativity like as in draw or design. Think of the word creativity as in emancipation, freedom. Freedom to be creative, freedom to be thought-provoking, freedom to speak, freedom to act. Think of creativity as in free. I can go here, I can go there, I can do this, and I can do that, and I'm not afraid. That's what they're really saying when it says, what can 5 monkeys teach us about creativity? The individual speaking was Colonel Casey P. Haskins on August 17th, 2011, sparking a culture of innovation at Chautauqua Institute in Chautauqua, New York, upstate New York somewhere. I'm trying to teach you guys the code. One of the reasons we're having an issue with our children actually seeing the things that are going on is because we taught them against it. So even though they may see racism, white supremacy, we've taught them that it is not racism, white supremacy, WSR. It is not injustice. We've taught them it's not a system, it's just a one-person thing. And in this year alone, you've seen WSR has been taking a hit all year. It's been taking a hit because it's something that does exist. I've let you guys listen to their videos. I let you guys read. Other people have spoken on this. This McDonald's just lost its settlement where it was racially discriminating against one of its owners, franchise owners. What am I saying? You've taught your sons and daughters to look away when they see it. Now when they see it, they're unprepared and they're ill-equipped and they do not want to fight it or face it. You taught them to look away, and by golly, they're going to do everything in the sun to look away. And when they do everything in this under the sun to look away, that puts you, your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren at a severe, supreme disadvantage. That means you may be able to be okay, but your children and grandchildren are not going to have access to the amenities that you have access to. Well, what do you mean? They've been telling you for the last 15, 20 years that they're running out of Social Security. Well, when you really do the work, who's getting the Social? How are you going to run out of something that was saved? Who's getting the Social Security? They did not expect for as many baby boomers to live as long. And when they started letting foreigners over and immigrants over, if they qualify for that age group, if they qualify for that paperwork, if they qualify for that application, they too get access to Social Security. Understand. Understand your welfare. Your welfare was not meant for foreigners or immigrants. It was only meant for the American citizens. When Rockefeller came out with the New Deal, and when they had all those welfare programs and all those work unions were primarily for your black folks, your white folks, your Irish folks, your Jew folks. It was primarily meant for them. They were your heavy class in America at that time. Now, since 1954, and it is a documentation that lets you know they started immigrating or bringing a large number of immigrants in, overwhelmingly large, around the 1950s. 1954 Immigration Act or something like that, and they started letting a lot more other nationalities in. And when those other nationalities got in, they started taking away from your resources. They got your jobs, they got your land, they got that side of town, they got the house, they got residency, they got access to jobs. It is the same thing that they're doing right now. They've done it over and over, and they're going to always do it because of you. You are in a system that is protected by you. What the hell? Even though there are WSR soldiers, foot soldiers, there's always somebody putting in their work. The system cannot work unless you allow it to work. And in the last 65 to 70 years, you've allowed it to work. And now you're at a point in your life where your kids are terrified of it. They're more afraid of it than you are. And they have not been through what you've been through. But they are more afraid of it than you are because you taught them to be afraid of it. Your children have, in the last 50 years, your children have not seen a bombing of a church by white people against black people simply because they were black. In the last 50 years, your children have not seen racial discrimination where they couldn't buy a house just because of their skin complexion, so they were denied a house, or you have the privilege of buying a house, but then the local whites in that area and that neighborhood were throwing Molotovs through the front door. In the last 50 years, your children have not seen a lynching to the capacity that they were seeing lynchings 1964 on and before. So where did the fear come from? Why are they so afraid of white people? They're afraid of white people because you taught them to be afraid of white people. And the women are secretly teaching their children to be white. That is a whole nother conversation. I don't even want to get into that. I try to give you breadcrumbs to space it out so that you can see that we're in this predicament because of the women. They're absolutely rebellious, and they're in open revolt and open rebellion only against the black man. We're in this predicament because women raise weaker men, and weaker men are now old, and they are tasked. Nature has tasked you with the responsibility of fixing, providing, mending, reciprocity, repairing all that is broken in your nation, and you are ill-equipped and unprepared, you don't understand how to do it, and you disagree when another person says, get off them goddamn cigarettes. Put that marijuana down. Well, marijuana don't make you high. God damn it, shut the fuck up and put it down. I don't care if it does, if it doesn't. Shut the fuck up and get that shit out of your goddamn hands. You're drinking every time, man. Well, you know, I just need a little something. I'll give him a little something. You sound like 1960s, 1970s. You sound like you're back at a time where you really, really needed those tools of escapism. Man, I just need something to get me over the hump, man. These motherfuckers getting on my nerve. You didn't have the cold medicine. You were suffering from a rotten goddamn tooth. And you didn't have the money to go to the dentist, so your toothache or your cavity festered so long to where it was so hurtful. A pint of White Irish Rose was good. Mad Dog was good. Thunderbird, I mean, I just need a little bit. Next thing you know, you get hooked on it only because you're trying to douse the pain of the toothache. You guys are running around here today with a lot of addictions that you don't need, that you don't have a reason for, except somebody has taught you to be afraid of white people, and you know you're afraid of white people because when it was time for you to speak up, you didn't speak up. You know you're afraid of white people because you thought it was better to go ahead and to let them mistreat you because it was easier. I'll just deal with it. I've been dealing with that all my life. I'll let them mistreat me as long as I can pay the rent and feed my kid. You did that. You know the fear that you have that lies in. You know that. We don't need to talk about that. What we need to talk about is how we can get past that, because if we don't get past this, all the success that we're having this year, we're going to lose. Why? Because we don't like keeping the foot on the gas. We don't mind stirring some shit up and kicking some dust. We don't mind shaking the trees. What we do not like to do is we don't like to keep the pressure. You're going to have to teach your sons and daughter WSR is a live and full effect. The FBI is telling you that they in every police department and every division. The body cameras that are coming up on now on social media and the news and the talking points and that dumbass Kamala Harris and that stupid ass president. Everything is letting you know, no, it's live and it's a full effect, and it is stopping you. It is interfering with you, and it is hindering your ability to be economically successful. It only goes away if you keep the pressure. Warrior class, Zoo, rise up. Warrior class, Zoo, speak up. Warrior class, Zoo, show up. Warrior class, Zoo, smoke them out. Peace. Black power.
Everybody, everybody, everybody. Every goddamn body.
Fair Use Act disclaimer. This site is for educational purposes only. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research.